Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast with me, Joshua Jackson. This podcast, just like the Leaders Council itself, is all about recognising and celebrating the people who keep this great country running. We exist to give leaders a voice outside of their own organisations and to support them in the same way they support their staff every single day of the week. If you're in a leadership position yourself and would like to have your voice heard on the national stage, please go to leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply. Each week on this programme, I'm joined by a different leadership figure from the world of business, education, politics, sports, or even from local communities, in the aim of truly discovering who those people are that get up every morning and make this country work. We get their take on the current economic and political landscape of the UK and discuss everything from traditional manufacturing to shifting public opinions and, of course, the success and the innovation that makes it all worthwhile in the end. On today's programme, I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Gawith, Director of Gawith Hoggarth, the last manufacturer of smoking tobacco in the UK, with a long and distinguished history of providing quality products to consumers. Without further ado, Chris, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Not a problem at all. It's great to have you on the show. Really interesting, background and company history you've got. But obviously, the first thing we should talk about is business disruption, everything over the last 18 months, COVID, and, well, how's it all been?
Yes. I guess probably like many other companies is how it's been, chaos for the most part. Having said that, I think we did quite well. We've been quite lucky until recently. We're mid-August now, 2021. We've managed to sail through almost with no infections and no disruption at all until roughly about 6 weeks ago, when people started watching football in bars, and we started to get a couple of infections, which has caused some amount of disruption to production and things like this. But I think when you go back to the start, I think when we reflect on COVID and business, and the government does its review and everything like this, it was a lot of the disruption, I certainly from our point of view, was to do with messaging. It was to do with what are we supposed to be doing, what are we allowed to do, and what happens if something happens, or what happens if the worst happens, and who's liable for what, and all these sorts of things. I remember within the first, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of the proper full lockdown, I remember one of my staff coming to me saying, "Chris, can you write me a letter to say I'm okay to come to work because the police are stopping people coming to work?" Things like this, which, it seems a bit crazy now, doesn't it? Thinking like that, but at the time, that's what was happening. And, before it was clarified that, manufacturing businesses could stay open and things like this, we didn't know if the police were going to come through the door and shut us down. Again, seems a bit dramatic, but that was a sentiment in that sort of hysteria and panic that we all experienced at the time. And so we did things like, we had some more aged members of staff and other people that were shielding. And it was simply a case of, okay, guys, we don't know what to do. There's this furlough thing. You need to go home. And we'll figure it out from there. And so I think we sent home a large part of the production force for about 3 weeks, while the rest of us stayed and figured things out. Luckily we had we were quite well stocked, so we managed to keep, selling things. But you look back now over the last 2 years, and you think there's been quite a few moments where you think, are you going to be here next year? Are we able to sell stuff? Are we able to make stuff? And so we've come through it okay, but even towards the end now, this last sort of, hopefully the end, 6 to 8 weeks, it has just been, people isolating because they have the virus, people isolating because other members of their family and they're staying in the same house together have to. And I think the most disruptive thing with it, it's not like a holiday that you can plan for. It's just people disappearing. And 2 weeks ago, I had 8 members of staff walk out in the same day because of COVID.
Wow.
Not all because of COVID here, but because of COVID-related things.
Yeah,
it was some people that were where we had an infection, and a group of we said to people, look, if you've been in contact with this person, go and get tested. And of course, some people went and got tested, even though there's no way that they'd been in contact with them, or very unlikely to. And then they get told they can't go back to work until they get the test results. And then other people, totally by chance, whose other family members in the same household report an infection on the same day, and then they walk out. And then other people saying, well, I've got family members that are in hospital and I've got to go and see them because they're severely ill or had an operation or something. I'm sorry, I have to go and get tested now. And suddenly everyone just evaporated, leaving the handful that was left, doing a lot more than we usually do.
You've really covered the chaos there of the last 18 months, especially the initial just everybody locked down through to the pandemic of the last 6 weeks. And do you think that there was enough government support there? Do you think that the government should have been doing more to sort of help businesses survive and to keep the message clear? Or do you actually think that maybe towards the end of this, it was a little bit more of people taking advantage?
We've seen both. We've seen people sort of jumping up and down here saying, hooray, hooray, I've been pinged in the early time, and then realising that, well, there's only so much money we can give you or not, or whatever the current situation was, and then became less appealing to them. I think the messaging has been fairly atrocious throughout. It's been a difficult time for the government, but I almost think it's been harder for the businesses and for those people caught up in it. From a personal point of view, my other half was in Switzerland and I was here for like 8 months. So there's, the messaging's not been great. In terms of support, I think that, we haven't, apart from the furlough scheme, we haven't claimed any grants, we haven't claimed anything. We've always sort of stood on our own feet and be self-sufficient. So I can't really comment too much on that.
Sure.
But I think there has been an element of the taking advantage. I remember we've done various rounds of furlough on sort of group levels. And I remember, and it might have been a little bit, in jest, but someone turning around saying, well, you can't furlough me now, the weather's wrong. Or it's the wrong time of year to be furloughed, or whatever it was. It wasn't last summer when it was really hot in, was it May, June or something. And being furloughed then was great because everyone sat out drinking beer inside in their gardens and basically getting paid their full salary, more or less, for doing it.
Yeah.
And then when you get into the winter and people are being furloughed, they're just somehow not quite as keen.
That's the first time I've ever had anybody use that excuse. That's very much a new one. And I've heard a lot from business leaders across the country on their own and their particular circumstance.
Our lot can be quite special.
That's absolutely brilliant way of putting it. And from your own sort of personal perspective here as well, do you think that you've had to sort of stand up and be a different style of manager during this time, different style of leader? Do you think you've had to adapt
absolutely.
as much as everybody else?
I think I think for me, again, it's probably, I think the business leading and the personal side, there's obviously a lot of crossover because it obviously the personal side reflecting how you lead and try and influence people, I suppose. I think so. I think, when people are, it's sad to see. And it's, we can't just keep paying people full salary to be off for 2-3 weeks at a time when most of the time there's been nothing wrong with them. They are just self-isolating and they've been absolutely fine with no symptoms or anything. And just like most companies, you're following the guidelines and paying what the guidelines or what you should be paying. And I think it maybe made me a bit more, not that I wasn't before, but it just highlighted that compassion of, well, look, we're going to send you guys home, and some of you might be able to pay the rent, some of you might not be able to pay the rent, sort of thing. And I just think it's, people being off sick is sort of one thing, and there's almost more discretion there in the remuneration side of that.
Of course.
But when it's en masse, it's a bit more. You almost feel you have to be a bit more hard line with it, because you just can't just justify just increased overheads
You're
with
having
less
to
production.
put the business first, as well as try and make sure that, and take that long-term view.
I think that's a good
really.
way. I think that's a good way of putting it. It's you don't want to put the business first in some circumstances, and it kind of hurts to have to do that. But, a bit, yeah.
And absolutely, it is one of those things that without the business surviving, then everybody's going to be hurt more in the long run, regardless. And I think a lot of that was people lost sight of that somewhat with all of the support and all of the measures and the talking of furlough schemes to try and keep everybody going. But there are still overheads for business runners, especially manufacturers like yourself, that have much higher overheads than, let's say, a digital marketing agency.
They do, and it sort of then brings you on to that similar sort of conversation then about maybe some changes that you made, but they were made because you had to get used to doing without people. And I know I've spoken to, quite a few other people who run companies locally around here, and, in other conversations where, when I always say to people, when they say, can we take I want to go to Australia or somewhere, I want to take a 3-4 week holiday. And I'm like, well, that's fine, as long as your work is maybe covered. It's unusual and it's rare, but if you have to, maybe you've got family that live far away, maybe you've got to make a concession within a company. And I always say to people, well, that's fine, but just don't forget, if we can do without you for a month, we might be able to do without you for 12.
Of course. That's
because, no company wants to be carrying dead weight or people that aren't, important in their own right, and to value those people. And so if people think they can sort of either be excused or have to be excused because of something like a pandemic, it just only makes you think, well, what are we going to do if these people don't come back, or if, for whatever reason, or and that has then shaped and resulted in redundancies. It has here, because you realise that, we're going to have to find a smarter way of working. And that is often then found in software and better process, things like this, and just job sharing a little bit. And, so we have been through that pain of making people redundant as well, which is, obviously never a great thing. But maybe, we said in this company a long time ago when this started that, those companies that come out the other side of this and have made changes are probably going to come out stronger.
That is seems to be the case across the board. That there have been changes. There have been different methods of working, and as I say, with the start of this sort of leadership style as well. But it is going to make people more resilient moving forwards. But obviously, given your particular industry, tobacco production, it hasn't just been COVID that has been the issue, really. It's been over a number of years that things that have been sort of hitting the industry and hitting, again, UK manufacturers. Now we're just starting to see the impacts of Brexit, shipping issues, haulage issues, as well as changes in legislation. It hasn't been an easy few years for you, really.
No, it hasn't. I mean, there's been the Tobacco Products Directive that's been sort of rolling on for quite a number of years in different variations. And, these obviously had been sort of born out of the European Union, back then. And then we've obviously, as a country, inherited, a lot of European directives into UK law and things like this. So a lot of things have rolled on. And, some of this legislation is hard to meet for small companies. And, we do try and work as closely as we can with, HMRC and other areas of government where we can. A lot of this regulation is to do with combating illicit trade of tobacco, which I think for the most part, most people and most of the population would think is a good thing. You know, we don't want illicit tobacco here. You don't know what's in it, like with any restricted goods. It's loss of money for the exchequer, and it's obviously loss of money for those businesses that are effectively being defrauded as well. And but what that comes with is a system that is sort of has really shaken the whole industry right across Europe, and it's a system that effectively requires currently every packet of cigarettes or hand rolling tobacco to have a unique serial number on it. So, you know, if anyone listening to this smokes or whatever, or you see some cigarette packet in the street, that will have a code on it like no other in the entire European continent. And those codes have to be purchased off the government or a government, depending on where it's being sold. And they have to be marked on the packs, and it has to be traced all the way through the supply chain, effectively to where that packet was purchased from. And the data inside this is incredible. I mean, they know what machine it was made on, who made it, when, who bought it, has it been paid for, and that's the key point. They want to start using this as a sort of, a reinforced, has the duty been paid on this product or not, and a way to identify illicit products. It's very hard for an illicit trader to buy a code off a government, because you can only buy that code if you are a registered manufacturer.
Absolutely.
So it's an interesting project, and I think to be fair to HMRC and the British government, they've done quite well with it, and they've worked very hard with it. But the cost to us is enormous. Those products at the moment, as I mentioned, the hand rolling tobacco, which is we make pipe and hand rolling mainly. We don't make any cigarettes here, and it takes us probably 25% extra time to produce that same hand rolling than before we had this scheme.
It seems like a huge cost to bear, especially for a smaller manufacturer like yourself. You have the international firms, your British American Tobaccos, your Philip Morris's. That's easier to adapt to these wholesale legislation changes and these increased costs. And has there been the support there for you as a more luxurious and
no, none. I mean, you get, I suppose, a nod of sympathy across the table from those big companies. I mean, we sit around the table with HMRC and the big four tobacco companies on a very regular basis. Their ability to adapt to this is also very expensive, but proportionally compared to their profits, it is a drop in the ocean.
Yes.
And they're running on full automation, where you're basically going to split open a production line and insert a new module, which is more or less going to take care of, that part of the marking and the pack aggregation and all this sort of thing. For us, we do everything by hand. So this is just another process that you're doing by hand.
Interesting. It's when you're doing everything and that's at that scale, and you're doing it by hand, it really does add on a whole nother level. But I suppose that really brings you to your niche. It is the quality. It is the history that you have, and the way that you've done things that's given you the company as it stands today. And whilst I'm sure there are many issues in having that tradition, being able, having things that have been done this way, so that's the way we'll always do them, I'm sure it also gives you a sense of pride in the product as well.
It does, yeah. I mean, this company, it's funny because its reputation within, should we say, specialist tobacco on a global scale is way bigger than the actual company. Certainly, customers of ours or consumers that have our products in other parts of the world, when they speak to us, or maybe they have a bit of a comment or a complaint or whatever it is, they always speak to us like, we're a massive company. This idea that, well, we just want to place an order for something, but it might be half a container. Well, that might take us 3 months to make. For a big tobacco company, they will literally push a button and a container will more or less drop out the back end of the factory. And So, yeah, I mean, it does give you that pride. And I think what people like about our product is it actually has sold. That the quality of the leaf that we use is very high. We have to use much larger leaves often for a lot of our products, which are obviously more expensive, harder to find. Your sort of mass-produced products are often produced with, certainly cigarettes, are a lot cheaper leaf. Sometimes not even really leaf at all. It's sort of reconstituted stuff. And I think people do like that. And actually, the products haven't intentionally changed over the last few hundred years. They sometimes change because the leaf is no longer there. So, for example, there's a type of leaf called a latakia that you buy. It's a very sort of dark smoked, strong smelling leaf, and I sort of feel, to me, it's sort of the charcoal of tobacco leaf for blends. That used to come a lot from Syria, and obviously not anymore. No. Now that may well have changed. Products that are heavy in latakia may then seem a bit different now because things happen. Wars start, droughts happen, and where product comes from does change. And I think the other side that's quite interesting for us is that many of these tobacco companies and many of these blends that you'll see in supermarkets and such, they might have about 20 to 30 different types or sources of leaf in them. And that's there to mitigate the natural changes from crop to crop. It's a bit like wine. You can have a good year, a bad year within the same vineyard.
Of course.
And that's what we're a little bit like because we might only have 2 or 3 different types of high quality leaf in our blends. So when there is a crop change, maybe you're going to see it more.
And I think that's a sort of interesting point you've just raised there as well, given that, you say things change with drought, with, the environmental conditions. And obviously, given the topics of conversation this year now we're sort of looking ahead to COP26, there's issues with worldwide shipping. Are you finding that there are changes going on across the industry when it comes to sort of what's available?
Yes. We've had to source some slightly different things. So that if we just sort of jump to the Brexit situation slightly, we have to dive in and out of that, I think. So the rules of origin that are implied to have a preferential tariff between the UK and the EU on tobacco products they're difficult. So it's something like you've got to have at least 10% wholly obtained material in your product if you're going to send it, the other way, or whatever. Well, there isn't any leaf grown in the UK. And actually, European leaf is quite hard to get hold of. And Europe doesn't really grow enough leaf to supply, the European smoking market. And I believe it actually sells quite a lot of its leaf to outside of the European Union. Okay. So we've had to source leaf from Europe so that we can actually attempt, hopefully one day, to sell back to Europe. And we actually found some leaf in Poland, and it's really good leaf, and it wasn't too expensive actually. And I think we've been very lucky to find it, and that will allow us to send stuff back to Europe eventually once we cross the transportation issues that I'll come on to shortly. And without that preferential tariff, you're looking at, I think it's a 74.9% import tariff.
Wow.
This basically prices a lot of our European customers out of the market, and it obviously then depends on how their tobacco duties are calculated on top of that.
Yeah, the issues of getting things to and from the mainland as well, as you say, you're about to come onto it, plus those tariffs, plus then the extra costs of having to deal with the hand mark stamping on each packet of tobacco or product sold. It all adds up.
It goes up and up. It goes up and up. And that Polish leaf is quite interesting actually. So we've not been able to send really any product to the European market, which was a good market for us. It wasn't entirely keeping all the lights on, but it was a really good chunk of our export market, which we're relying on more and more as a business. As the UK market sort of smoking's always been decreasing 10% a year or whatever, and if you accept that, it's been like that for decades. But these complexities of moving things around are getting really difficult. We've not sent anything to the EU since I think November last year. We've got people queuing up to place orders. I think I have about 4 new distributors that we would like to talk to, and we can't send anything. And then the question is why? Why can't you send anything? Is it, people talk paperwork. Oh, trust me, tobacco, you're used to paperwork. Paperwork is not the problem. Clearing customs anywhere in the world, we're quite good at that now. The problem is physically getting the vehicles. And it's not so much just in the UK, it's actually convincing some company in the EU to maybe come and collect your products because they deem the risk too high. And so we had a situation with that Polish leaf where it took us, we bought it, we paid for it, it sat, I think, in Antwerp for a few months while they were looking for a trucking company to bring it here, and eventually found a French forwarding agent that I think employed, I think it was a Romanian trucking firm, to collect it from Antwerp and bring it here. Now, that forwarding firm didn't even realise they had to submit paperwork at the UK border at any. So, one afternoon you get a call. There's lots of emails flying around. The truck has been seized by police. It's carrying tobacco, and people getting very worried about fines. And I think this is the thing. I mean, they literally turned up with no customs clearance documents or anything. There hadn't been any customs entry made or anything. So I think a big part of this transport issue that seems to be going on between UK and EU is that actually on the EU side, they really don't understand Brexit at all. And we have similar experiences with other suppliers of actually finished tobacco products that we bring in and distribute for other people. And it seems to be there was this thing called Brexit, and it meant something not to do with the EU, and now it's all finished. That's it, back to normal. And it just seems to be a real lack of education on the EU side to understand what you have to do to come to the UK. And I'm more than certain that would be reciprocated, that lack of knowledge the other way. But the difficulty is trying to get people to come here, because obviously if they come to the Lake District where we are to collect 2 or 3 pallets of tobacco, the chances of them getting stopped because of paperwork and things like this, maybe in Calais, are probably higher than if they were just carrying Kendal mint cake, for example. Okay,
of course.
And so they don't want to take the risk of getting stopped and losing valuable driving time when they're already running very tight logistical operations.
And I can imagine they're charging you a premium for the privilege of when they are able to pick up as well, which with the previous statements, knock-on effect.
Yeah. So, but whether this is an unsolvable, never-ending problem of Brexit, I'm not sure I hold that slightly glass half empty view. I think that when things are more understood, which I believe we understand them a lot better here, but once you can find decent partners to work with within the EU, I think a lot of these things will become a lot easier. I'm not saying the costs are going to go down, because costs very rarely go down, but the cost is one thing, but the cost doesn't mean a lot when you can't physically move the goods at all.
Of course, it's logistical teething problems at the moment. And again, you need to find yourselves those trusted partners. They need to trust you to make sure that you're doing everything above board as well. And then everybody moves from there. But it's not all sort of bad news for you at the moment. No. It's something that you've been looking to do is to move more further afield, get away from just the sort of EU market or the British market and start going worldwide. And how's that?
So I think sort of the Brexit thing has probably given us that springboard slightly. So our big problem here is production capacity. It never really used to be too much of a problem, but since we started saying yes to more inquiries coming from overseas, we've been fairly inundated with requests for product. And, most months we're figuring out how on earth we're going to produce it. And we're actually having to turn down and tone down some of the orders coming from non-EU countries. And I have to say it has sort of played out a bit like the government maybe wanted, industry to do. We've just looked elsewhere and we found it.
The global British vision.
The global Britain thing, and a company like this, where you've really got this sort of best of British and something quite unique going on with this beautifully long pedigree trailing out behind it. And a company that's actually incidentally done very little marketing in the past, and we're trying to sort of, develop our sort of brand and our image of who we are, because our main thing is we want people to become part of the journey. A bit cliched, I know, but we want people to sort of be part of this heritage that we have, and get involved on social media. And it's nice that actually myself and my sister, who actually runs a lot of the social media side, the consumers anywhere in the world get to interact with the company owners and talk about their products. And actually that's worked out really nice, and we enjoy doing it. And we settle a lot of rumours on social media as well, because there's always rumours out there about you, about your company. But yeah, so I mean, United States is a fantastic country to work with, and we've got some great partners there, some new ones as well, and things are going well. I mean, whether any of the American fan club will listen to this, maybe, hopefully, we try and supply as much as we can, but the reality is, a 20-foot container, we used to do 40-foot containers, used to just take just so long to fill that no one really got any product. They'd have to wait 6 months to get their products, which isn't great. Better to trickle it in and people have a smaller regular supply than just have one big thing dumped on the doorstep and everyone panic buys and things. But 20-foot container takes us, depending on what's in it, it can take us the best part of 3 months to put together. It's sold in 8 days.
Wow.
So
that's a very, very quick turnaround. And may I say, for anybody as well that's listening in, to actually go and have a look at the Gawith Hoggarth product range, the balls of twist tobacco, you really will be able to see the beauty of the products and the like class and the quality of the finish. Yeah, it really is something special, and it really, by seeing that, it will really make you understand what Chris is trying to say when he's saying the time it takes to fulfill these orders is because the quality really is there, and it's something to be proud of.
And you can't automate a lot of these processes. You really can't. I mean, things like that twist tobacco, as the Americans call it, rope tobacco. You've got to hand feed. You've got to almost iron the leaves out beforehand so they're flat, and you've got to hand feed and splice them onto the end of the rope, leaf by leaf. It's incredibly laborious and time-consuming process, and it actually requires quite a lot of skill from the operators to do it as well. And they make it look incredibly easy. I'm told I've never tried it, but I'm told it's a skill to have. And there's not many people making it. So United States, like I say, a great place to be at the moment. We basically have perpetual orders from United States for both the Gawith Hoggarth and Samuel Gawith brands, more or less, which is great, because if we've got any downtime, because let's say you can't send anything to the European Union, you're never going to be quiet. You've got some people there that are just going to keep buying the product. Luckily, they enjoy it and they like interacting with us. But going the other way as well, China has been a big customer. Again, you can't really meet their demands. That's an interesting market. I wouldn't want to say how long it will be, around for. Politically, obviously, it's a hard place to to do business sometimes with certain commodities. But even our companies that we sell to in Japan, South Korea, some of these places in Eastern Europe, they're coming on quite nicely. You're seeing a more regular pattern and a more steady way of trading with them. And once you get to know somebody and what their market requires in terms of their regulation and such, it gets easier. And we're not, we're busy without, as much as I want to sell into Europe because they're on the doorstep and, we want to sell to our European customers. We just can't. And we've had to go looking elsewhere, and we have found plenty of business elsewhere. And, we have some projects in Russia, which also, if can be done correctly, potentially going to be a huge market for us.
Again, a very interesting place to start doing business, though, making those connections, and politically and business-wise, a whole change in style for you. Mm.
Yeah, it is. And their requirements as you sort of go to each sort of corner of the world almost, what they're after is obviously slightly different. The American market likes the very traditional side. And the Russian side's more interested in the pipe, but they're interested in the rolling tobacco as well. But again, doing stuff by hand, we're having to throttle back some of these orders because we just they scare me when they come in. And you think that's going to take our team, 4 months just doing nothing else for anyone or something. So, but I think within that as well, we're relatively. We have been exporting for a long, long time, but not on this scale. This has only been happening the last few years. So the team, we've been learning a lot about customs in different countries, how to get things there. And I think it's definitely a big part of our future. We're obviously never going to abandon the UK in terms of a market as long as we're allowed to operate for the UK. But there is so much world out there. It would just be nice to have the freedom to trade with the European Union in a slightly more fluid way.
I'm sure that things will even themselves out once the initial political ill will, or maybe the current political masters sort of move on, and then the next generation come through, or the next elections come through, really. But so it seems like a very interesting time period for you. Obviously, we've gone through COVID, through opening your arms to the world, not being able to trade directly to the EU, but trying to bring it sort of all together the next 3, 6, 12 months. Do you have anything you're particularly focusing on? Are there going to be new areas of the business you're opening, or is it just going to be about trying to catch up?
Well, it's a bit of catch up. I think it's more not so much catch up; it's more dust settling. It's the aftermath of COVID, and is everyone going to fall back into the usual way of working, and just that, having that consistency. Yeah, I mean, we have some new systems that are going in. More sort of ERP type stuff that we're doing. I think for us, it's more about trying to meet this production requirement. So it's not even really just looking the next 6 to 12 months. It's looking at where we're going to go in the next probably 3 years, I think. And there's a huge amount of development to do. We're doing a lot of the development in-house ourselves as well as outsourcing some of it. So we're still trying to bring the company up to date in many ways, not only obviously on a compliance basis, but just there's a lot of things in an old company like this which in a more modern company, even that's only 50 years old or something, you would take for granted. And some of these processes and systems are, they've never really been implemented here, but we're just always wanting to make the customer service better, production a bit more efficient, and see if we can actually meet or get somewhere close to meeting the demand of the sort of global market, really. But ultimately, it'd be nice to get a holiday at some point.
Well. And I think that right there is an amazing sort of overview of exactly what it is that you've been doing, and a great way to sort of wrap up the interview. It's going to be fantastic to be sort of following along with your story and following along with how you're going to improve these processes, look to continue trading, bring your company into the modern age while still harking back to that traditional style.
Exactly.
And eventually, I hope you get the holiday. But Chris, that was a great interview. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show today. And it'll be great to catch up with you again in a few months. And
good. It'd be a pleasure.
See, as you say, when the dust settles.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you for having us on. It's always good to get to sort of talk a bit about what we do. And hopefully, I think it would be nice to think that there's also some insights that, people wouldn't normally get just from, Facebook or anything else.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you.